Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we're realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. The Bible has a very long and foundational relationship with American culture and government. A very interesting fact about the Bible that few recognize is all the promises made to the Jews were temporal promises. And what I mean is that it was blessings in this life for obedience in this life. And another interesting fact is that all the promises made to Christians are heavenly promises. They are eternal and heavenly. Now, what does that mean? Well, I can only tell you what I believe about these interesting facts. And first is that they're spoken pretty much to everyone, not just simply Jews and Christians. And they're clearly a promise for this life to everyone. Blessings in life for obedience in this life. They were given to the Jews because, well, nobody was really interested in good. The Bible says there's none good but God. So God separated a family, Abraham's family, and gave them the rules for living a prosperous life here on the earth. The problem is also that not even the Jews were that interested in the law and regularly violated it. And that's because they're human like all of us. And what they needed was a different perspective on the law, and that's what Jesus came to offer. The Christian has received the Holy Spirit. This was not available to the Jews on a regular basis, but was given to certain people at certain times for certain things. The exception being King David. His statement, "Please don't take your Holy Spirit from me," is evidence that he had the Holy Spirit pretty consistently in his life. Well, back to our governing principles. We get our rules for our laws from the promises given for keeping the Ten Commandments. If we don't kill, steal, covet, etc., life will go well with us, individually and as a people. However, the first commandment, to love God and your neighbor, holds the key to all of the others. We must love God first. Enter Jesus. He gave the world what we needed to love God first, not simply getting something for being good, but being given something even though we were not. And that gift, if received with the simplest understandings, provides what we need to live in this life and receive the blessings for this life, but also gives us an eternity to look forward to. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "We cannot read the history of our rise and development as a nation without reckoning with the place the Bible has occupied in shaping the advances of the Republic." And with that, I would like to welcome our guest this morning, Bob White. Bob is Chairman Emeritus of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida. Welcome, Bob.
Well, Chuck, thank you very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Super, super. And let's bring Mike in to complete the triumvirate here. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great, gentlemen.
Great, great, great. Well, Bob, let's get right to it. One the first little conversation we like to have is on constitutional carry. So what's going on with constitutional carry in Florida?
Well, I think probably your listeners are all very much aware already of the recent court ruling that came down declaring that the statutes in Florida that prohibited Florida citizens from being able to open carry were unconstitutional. And so therefore the legislature is going to have to, and so therefore they basically, the ban, just by virtue of that decision, the ban on carrying openly has been eliminated. The Attorney General has declared that to be the case, and basically agreeing with the court's decision. But now it's going to be up to the Florida legislature to come in and have to rework those sections of the statute in Florida that deal with carrying of firearms. And so it's not just as simple as everybody's going to be able to carry everywhere. There's going to be restrictions that are going to be based on particular types of facilities, government agencies, and things of that nature. Private property owners will still have the right to be able to prohibit carry in their establishments or their places of business. The issue is going to come up about, restaurants versus bars, or restaurants that also serve alcohol. All of these issues are going to at some point be addressed. But the thing that I like best about the fact that the legislature is going to have to now address these issues is that it's going to open up the debate to red flag law. It's going to open up the debate to carrying on college campuses. It's going to open up the debate on 18, 19, and 20-year-olds having their right to purchase a long gun restored. So I think that this really gives us an opportunity, those of us that are strong pro Second Amendment advocates, is going to give us an opportunity to really force the legislature into addressing not just open carry, but all of these other issues that we've been trying to get them to address now for quite some time. So I'm very excited about the prospects of this coming legislative session.
Well, super.
Okay.
Well, Mike, you have any
So I have a
comments on
question,
that?
Bob. Why don't you explain to our audience why this is so important?
Well, I mean, this is a right that was given to us not by the Constitution. It was a right that was given to us. It's a God-given right to be able to, your self-preservation, your self-protection. Okay, I mean, it's enshrined in the United States Constitution, but for years, Floridians have not been allowed to open carry in the state of Florida. Florida was one of only 5 states in the nation that did not allow open carry. The others were the ones that you would expect them to be: New York, California, Illinois. But even in California, they declared that if you lived in a rural county, and that was a county that was defined as having 200,000 or fewer residents in the county, they allowed open carry in rural counties. Now, county commissions and or the sheriff of that county were allowed to set certain requirements and provisions of it. But Florida was one of the only ones, one of the only states, one of the only 4 or 5 states that did not allow open carry within the state. So that's why this is so important, is that it basically reinstates for all law-abiding citizens here in the state of Florida the right to be able to carry, the right to be able to protect yourself from others, and to take responsibility for your own safety and the safety of your family.
So, Bob, with this upcoming legislative session, this will be the first legislative session after the court ruling. So what do you anticipate is going to happen there? And who do you think will, give us a preview of who will be sponsoring legislation that will respond to the court ruling, and what will their logic and rationale be?
Well, it's interesting. We don't really know yet. Leadership in the 2 chambers will designate somebody specifically to be that point person. And there's lots of speculation going on right now. I mean, I had somebody recently tell me that on the House side, they thought that it was going to be Monique Miller from here in Brevard County. I've not spoken to Monique directly about that. She's been on vacation down in Mexico for the last couple of weeks, so I haven't had an opportunity to actually ask her about that specifically. But that's one name that's been thrown out on the House side. On the Senate side, I haven't heard any names yet as to who's going to be the point person on working this issue through the process. But I'll be going to Tallahassee tomorrow. This week is the first of the committee weeks that are always scheduled leading up to the session. The session starts in January, but there are 2 committee weeks this month, 2 committee weeks next month, and then I think there's 1 committee week scheduled for December, and then that'll be it. Then we go right into. So I'll be up there tomorrow. This is the first of the committee weeks. John Hallman, who's been our legislative affairs consultant and our legislative affairs chairman for quite some time now, veteran of the process. John's going to meet me up there, and we're going to be going door to door talking about this issue as well as the other issues that are important to us. Campaign finance reform issues and those kinds of things. So I'm sure I'll be hearing a lot more when I get up there tomorrow. Good friend of mine is Tyler Soroy. Tyler's a rep from here in Brevard County. He's also the majority leader on the House side, and I spoke with him yesterday. He's got some ideas for some gun legislation that he's contemplating carrying. I mentioned red flag law, and I mentioned restoring the rights of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. So he told me when I spoke with him yesterday, he said, by all means, stop by my office when you come up and let's sit down and talk about some of these issues going forward. So I'm anxious to get up there tomorrow and really try to get a good handle on exactly what it is that's happening and how far we think we might be able to take these issues.
So just to close up the conversation on this, basically, there has to be reform. There have to be legislative reform
Right.
to accommodate the law.
That's
The
exactly right.
question becomes, with a Republican majority in the House and the Senate and a Republican governor, um, are you concerned about what might come about in the process of adjusting statute to accommodate the court ruling?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We're concerned because, after all, this is not the first session where we've had a Republican majority in the Florida House and the Florida Senate, right? I mean, we've had Republican majorities in the legislative branch like forever. It seems it goes back to 1990. I think was the first year that the Republicans took over the legislative branch, and so we've had these majorities, but yet we've had these laws passed that are anti-Second Amendment laws passed, like the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill, that basically violate the rights of law-abiding citizens, okay, and do absolutely nothing to address the problems that were there that precipitated that crisis in the first place. So to try to get, it's fallen on deaf ears because we've tried very hard over the last several sessions to get them to consider necessary reforms. The most we've been able to do is block additional legislation that would be even more against more anti-Second Amendment, but we've not been able to get them to take up anything that was pro-Second Amendment.
Super,
Okay.
super.
Well, I guess unless Chuck has some questions or concerns, I don't know, Chuck, what do you think? Are we done with open
I
hearing?
just want to, whenever we have people kind of chiming in and I pick up on it, I like to make, have our audience participate. Cheryl P. asks, what about SB 180 revisions? So are you involved in that legislation at all? If I remember, something about prohibiting certain local governments from adopting ordinances for substantial improvements or repairs to structure, which includes culminative substantial improvement periods, et cetera, et cetera. What say you, Bob?
Okay, that's a great question. And interestingly enough, I mentioned John Hallman is going to be meeting me up in Tallahassee tomorrow. And John, with the new organization that he's just started, along with Lane Watkins and a few others, the name of that organization is Defending Rural Florida. And the whole creation of this organization came about as a result of not just SB 180, but the very spurless, very bad legislation, the Live Local Act that was passed a couple of sessions ago and then updated the following session. Between the two of those bills, SB 180 and Live Local, this is like the development community's dream, okay, that they've had for so long that they would be able to develop property at will without being held in check by local planning agencies and local county commissions and city councils, et cetera. It really is almost like an unchecked opportunity for them to run roughshod over the process. And I think we all know, a good friend of mine coined the phrase that in real estate development here in the state of Florida, we now have capitalism on the front end and we have socialism on the back end, meaning that the developers themselves, okay, get to make all of the money that they want to on the front end, okay, of the process, but they're not being required. They haven't for quite some time. They haven't been required to make sure that the infrastructure exists to be able to support these developments that they're putting in place in the first place. So that's left to all of the existing taxpayers scattered in these different counties where these big major developments are going on. The taxpayers then end up having to foot the bill for all of the infrastructure improvements that are necessary as a result of these developments that are going in. So there's your socialism on the back end. Okay, and listen, this is coming from a guy that was the former custom home builder, and I was the president of the Home Builders and Contractors Association here in Brevard. I was on the board of directors of the Florida Home Builders Association for a number of years. That goes back, back in the 1990s, quite frankly, the early 1990s. So I've been around these kinds of issues for quite some time. And I'm sitting here saying, and maybe it's because I'm a native Floridian and I remember what it was like when we only had 6 million people living in Florida, and I'm sitting here saying that we have got to address what SB 180 has wrought. We've got to address what Come Clean Florida has wrought. And if you take those two pieces of legislation and you combine them with what the utility companies in Florida are doing, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, TECO, because they are all going full speed on solar energy production instead of natural gas and other alternatives. They're going full speed ahead into solar and nothing but solar. And that's going to be, and they're doing that because their profit structure is such that these are regulated monopolies, but they are guaranteed a profit of 11.3% on their capital expenditures. And guess what? Solar is much more expensive for them to put in than natural gas would be. It's much less efficient and much more expensive. So their 11.4% is going to go up exponentially because they're going strictly with solar now going forward. So we're working with David Walsh and others to try to raise awareness on that particular issue, because when you combine the effects of SB 180 and you combine it with the other legislation that we've talked about, the Live Local Act, and then if these utility companies are allowed to do what they want to do with solar, I've said this before, we're all going to wake up one morning and look out at the horizon. There's going to be nothing but rooftops and solar panels as far as the eye can see. And we need to do everything we can organizationally and individually to make sure that that doesn't happen.
That's true. That's true. Our time is just kind of very quickly running away. We're going to get ready to make some changes, but let me bring Mike in. Did you have a comment, Mike?
I just have to ask Bob, in your entire professional career, have you ever seen a more ridiculous business model than rewarding people based on expenses?
No.
I mean, that to me is the most ridiculous business model I have ever heard in my life.
It's absolutely obscene. It's absolutely obscene. And some of the biggest contributors, financial contributors, okay, in governor's races, in agriculture commissioner races, attorney general races for the Florida House and the Florida Senate, some of the largest contributors, financial contributors to these campaigns are the utility companies. And so they basically have the people that you would expect to defend us, the citizens, okay, and to keep them in check, all right, and make sure that their business models are fair for everybody, are the people that they're supporting for office. And so they don't want to upset the apple cart. Again, that's why it's so important for shows like this to be talking about these issues. And Come Clean Florida, which I hope we get a chance to talk about. That's important too. That's a huge issue.
Okay. Well, we need to pivot into that real quick.
Yeah,
we need to decide whether we're going to do Come Clean Florida or Liberty Rising first. Let's do Come Clean Florida first. Whatever you want, Bob.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, editor's note, we're probably going to run a little over today, but yes, I was kind of hoping we could get into Come Clean Florida. Please, Bob, tell us all about Come Clean Florida.
Well, the best thing that I can suggest is that people go to the website, comecleanflorida.org, comecleanflorida.org, and hit every single one of the tabs that you see across the top of the website. The home page, the about page, the history. We give some great history on campaign finance in the state of Florida. What this website is all about is the fact that the cash that's fueling the campaigns for the Florida House and the Florida Senate, for the governor's races, the cabinet races, the cash that's fueling these campaigns is being legally laundered, okay? It's being laundered, but it's legal. They're legally laundering all of this cash through myriad political committees that are allowed to make contributions to each other so that ultimately the original source of this money is hidden from the taxpayers, from the voters, okay? It's a Ponzi scheme like you wouldn't believe. It's literally campaign cash laundering. And if you go to the Come Clean Florida site, you'll get just hit the about and the history. Those two tabs alone will give you the full and complete picture. We actually started this cause back in 2014 when we realized just how big this problem was. But I got to say that it is publications like this, these kinds of voter guides, these fraudulent voter guides that got sent out during the last process that have literally awakened more and more people to the fact that we've got issues that need to be addressed. So contributions to political committees and their ability to make contributions to each other, unlimited. People think that there are limits on how much can be contributed to a candidate. They think that the candidate for a Florida House seat or a Florida Senate seat can only take $1,000. That's true into their campaign accounts. But guess what? They can all have an independent political committee with a separate bank account where they can take unlimited contributions. And they don't even really need to have one because all of these other political committees exist and they can spend money on behalf of candidates or against candidates. It's the most foul thing that you just can't even comprehend, the level of subterfuge that's going on in our election process here in the state of Florida. But that website will acquaint you with the issues.
And then I would just like to say that in the absence of morality in our legislature and our government, these are things that every one of our legislators should be looking at, and they're not. And basically, it just gets into the whole concept of whether they're, whether dissent and debate is even allowed in the Florida legislature, Bob.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Lord Acton said it best all the way back in the 1800s. Okay, this British nobleman coined the phrase, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what we have. That's what we have right now within the legislative branch in the state of Florida. A small handful of people have absolute power, not just over the process, but over the results. And not just the results of the legislation, but they wield this power because they're influencing the results of elections all over the state of Florida. This is the legislative leadership that is doing this through these various political committees that they're arranging to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars invested in races all over the state of Florida so that they're picking who's going to come to Tallahassee and be a part of their chambers. And that's where we got to draw a line. And that's where we got to restore some normalcy and put the people back in charge.
You're saying that
Absolutely.
our legislature is selected, not elected. Is that what you're saying?
You know what? That is a great way to put it. That is a great way to put it. Listen, the Florida, you're going to love this one. Legislative leadership here in the state of Florida, the Speaker of the Florida House, the President of the Florida Senate, and a couple of other highly placed elected leaders are on the board of directors of a national organization, the National Republican Legislative Committee, that raises millions of dollars from all over the country. Okay, they sit on the board of that organization, along with people like Karl Rove and others from all over the country. They got $1 million in January. They got $1 million from that national organization, contributed to one particular political committee here in the state of Florida back in January. That particular political committee then distributed it through 6 or 7 other political committees that then all made a contribution back into one other particular political committee. And that political committee put hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was involved in a campaign, special election for HD 32. April 1st was the date. This money was flowing through these committees in February and March, and there was almost $500,000 used against me in my campaign, and it was directed by leadership in the Florida legislature.
So,
there you go, ladies and gentlemen.
They didn't want me upsetting their apple cart in Tallahassee.
Yeah, well, that happens. That seems to happen on a fairly regular basis, I guess.
It does.
Another bit of proposed legislation you have on your website is the idea of prohibiting the use of pictures, images, or likenesses of anyone other than an immediate family member in a political ad without the person's written permission. Now, I guess that would keep people from saying they're MAGA with President Trump on their literature without his permission. Is that how that works?
That's exactly right. So we already talked about this voter guide, and this came out in 7 different counties in the state last year. Just a couple of examples from the race that I was in. Here's one that Terry Cronin put out. You can see he's got this photoshopped with him and Donald Trump. He's clearly trying to make it appear that he has Donald Trump's support. But here's my all-time favorite. The other candidate in this race, these are from my race, the race I was involved in. This is my all-time favorite. This guy right here, okay, produced this. It came out in the last week of the election. Okay, it was a big piece. It opened up on the inside, and he talks about some of the legitimate endorsements that he had. All right, but then you turn it over to the back page. Look at this. Okay, look at this on the back page of his mail. There's Donald Trump. There's J.D. Vance. Ron DeSantis, Byron Donalds, who endorsed me, our sheriff, Wayne Ivey, is on here, who had endorsed his other opponent, and even Grady Judd and Pam Bondi. And then look down here in this corner, it says endorsed. Endorsed. The clear implication is that all of these people have endorsed this candidate, and nothing could be further from the truth. And this is why we've got to have legislation that says you can't do this anymore. You just can't do this. I mean, your personal family members, sure, you can put them on your brochure all you want to. You're going to do something like this, you got to have their permission, written permission, before you can use their pictures in your campaigns. Because this is just going to get worse and worse and worse if we don't do something about it. So yes, that is one of the 2 pieces of legislation we talk about on the website.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, with our waning moments here, you also have a political committee of your own. Is it yours or is it RLC's? It's called Liberty Rising.
Liberty Rising is the political committee that is operated by, I'm the chairman of it. It's a combination. It's the money that we've raised off of our Constitution Day dinners for the last several years, and we've been building up the balance. We used some money during the elections. We vet and endorse candidates for the Florida House and the Florida Senate. And when I say we vet and endorse candidates, I mean in the primaries, not in the general elections. You know, typically the party waits until the general election and then they just support whoever has the R behind their name. It's been our purpose as an organization to get involved in the primaries and to vet candidates in the primaries. And we have had as many, in some election cycles, we've had as many as 120 plus candidates that are running for the Florida House and the Florida Senate as Republicans in the primaries that have sought our endorsement. And that's a process that we go through that we take very seriously. There's a questionnaire they have to fill out. Then, based on the strength or weakness of their questionnaire, we decide whether or not they're going to get an interview. They get a phone interview where we drill down even farther on the issues that are important. And we end up making endorsements in the primaries, one Republican over another, because we want to make sure that the very best, most constitutionally conservative, America First kind of candidate that supports our principles as an organization are the Jeffersonian principles of personal liberty, free markets, and limited government. That's what we're looking for in a candidate. And so we put our seal of approval, our endorsement on these candidates, and the Liberty Rising Political Committee is where we're raising money to be able to make contributions to their campaigns or to put out literature on their behalf to support them as much as we possibly can. And on that Come Clean Florida website, there is a I believe it's the Take Action tab. You can click on that tab and you'll find the QR code right there for Liberty Rising. And you can make a one-time contribution, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution of whatever amount you want to by just clicking on the QR code. And we'd appreciate whatever support we can get, because this is a critically important process that we go through. I tell people all the time, are we a republic or are we a democracy? And most people know that we're supposed to be a constitutional republic, right? And then I tell people, well, are we still a republic, or does it need to be restored? And everybody goes, oh, we've got to restore it. We've got to restore it. And I always tell them the same thing. Then stop paying so much attention to what happens in Washington, D.C., and start paying more attention to what happens in Tallahassee, Florida. Because if we're going to restore our republic, that's where it has to happen. The road to doing that begins locally, and it runs right through our state capital in Tallahassee, Florida. And every other state, has to do the same thing at the state level. That's where the republic gets restored. Washington is a lost cause.
And I just want to chime in real quick. I just take issue with something you just said, which I know you're going to agree with me, actually. You just said that the Republican Party of Florida and the Republican legislature kind of stays out of it until the general and doesn't get involved in primaries. But everything else that we've said so far today is in contradiction to that point, because the Republican Party of Florida and the Florida legislature, including the executive branch, are very involved in primaries. Wouldn't you agree, Bob?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm just talking about from an endorsement standpoint. The party's not going to put an official endorsement on a candidate in the primaries. They typically stay out of that. The only exception to that recently has been when Ron DeSantis wanted to get parental choice legislation passed. He then basically wanted the party to get involved in school board elections. And so many of the local Republican executive committees did get involved in some of the school board elections during that one particular election cycle. But for the most part, the party stays out of it from a formal endorsement process, and they just wait and support, and they're going to support whoever has that R behind their name on the general election. But behind the scenes, you're right, that behind the scenes, the subterfuge that exists, but it's really more, I got to tell you, it's more elected leadership within the legislative branch, much more so than it is the party. I mean, the party, they, there's some stuff going on there that probably shouldn't be going on. But my issue is really with the legislative branch and with the leadership there, much more so than it is with the actual party leadership itself.
Okay, well,
We could talk about that for a little bit, but I guess we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we actually are through our little 30-minute thing. Bob, we'd love to have you on again here soon.
It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, super. And so I wouldn't mind giving both of you an opportunity to for some closing remarks. Mike, you want to take it over here for a minute? If I can find you.
Well, I just think that the issues that we're talking about with Bob today are monumental issues. They run very deep into the way that our government is run. And of course, that has a lot of impact on the way of the quality of life for all Floridians, why it's so important that we get this done. But this is not new. None of the things we're talking about are new. They are systemic into our governmental system. And they're a monumental lift to get these things fixed. But the good news is, as I've said many times, that technology, and which is the result of this live stream, is giving the grassroots a stronger voice. And I'm optimistic that we can implement changes to the way that we operate, particularly with political committees and grassroots organizations. And I think the grassroots voice is getting stronger and stronger, and more difficult for the establishment, let's just say, to ignore. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob for his closing comments.
Yes, Bob, please.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Chuck and Mike, thank you both very much for having me on today. I've thoroughly enjoyed the discussion, and Mike's absolutely right. There's nothing really new about this, okay? The public's awareness of it has grown exponentially since really the last election cycle back in November of last year, largely because of those fraudulent mailers that went out that showed a picture of Donald Trump and a picture of Ron DeSantis, the little red baseball cap in the middle. I mean, that was clearly designed to get the voting public to believe that everybody on that voter guide had the endorsement of those two individuals. And they even went so far as on the back side of it to put the logos for the local Republican Executive Committee and the Republican Party of Florida on the back of those mail pieces without authorization, without any permission. That piece of legislation that we talked about on picture and image and likeness, the party wants to support that legislation. So they at least recognize that that's a huge issue and that needs to be addressed. Okay, so that's an important step. But again, we originally launched Come Clean Florida back in 2014. And we're now in the process of completely updating the website and giving it a new, fresh look and adding new examples. And all anybody needs to do, just go to the website, click on not just the home page, click on the About page and click on the History page and click on the examples. And you'll see, and the legislation we've been talking about is right there where the tab says 2026 legislation. And you'll see if you go through the History tab and the examples and the About, and just read what's there, the information that we provided, you'll have a thorough understanding of just how serious this problem is and why it's got to be addressed if we're really going to be a government of, by, and for the people, as opposed to a government of, by, and for the donor class in the state of Florida. It's the people versus the donor class, and I'm all about the people taking the power back from the donor class, and that's what that website's about. And thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you, Bob. And if you're tired of calling people rhinos, I've kind of changed my terminology here because I think a little more maybe shameful is talking about the left wing of the Republican Party, because that's really kind of what's happening here. We've destroyed the Democrats, or President Trump has destroyed the Democrat Party, and now we have to start looking at the left wing of the Republican Party. So thank you all again for tuning in to our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic -ROAR. Like and share the program, please. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. So until next time, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.